The cell was silent, except for the faint scratching of rats moving in the darkness. No one remembered how long the boy had been there, locked away from the world. Once he had been dressed in silks, carried on golden thrones, and cheered by a kingdom. Now his skin was pale, eaten by sores, his hair tangled with filth, and his young body was wasting away. The boy was a prince. His blood was royal. His future was meant to be filled with power, riches, and legacy. Yet he was left to rot alive, imprisoned not by an enemy, not by strangers, but by the man who had given him life, his very own father. Imagine the cold betrayal of looking at the person who brought you into the world, the person who should have protected you, and realizing that same man had condemned you to die in darkness. That was the cruel fate of a forgotten prince whose name barely lingers in the records of history, buried under centuries of silence and shame. This is not just a tale of royalty or politics. This is a story of fear, power, cruelty, and a young boy's slow decay behind walls that were never meant to cage him. It is a chapter of history so grotesque, so unbelievable, that it feels closer to a nightmare than truth. Tonight, we peel back the curtain on one of the darkest family betrayals in the chronicles of monarchy. A story where a father became his son's executioner, not with sword or fire, but with something far slower: time, neglect, and deliberate cruelty. Stay with us, because as we unfold the tragic end of the boy prince, you will come to see not only the depth of his suffering, but also the terrifying truth of how absolute power corrupts even the most sacred bonds. Centuries ago, Europe was a theater of kings, castles, and constant struggles for the throne. Behind the glamour of crowns and ceremonies, the royal families were haunted by suspicion, betrayal, and fear of rivals, even if those rivals were their own children. In one such kingdom, a powerful king ruled with iron hands. His reign was marked by paranoia, for he believed enemies lurked not only in foreign courts, but in his very palace. The greatest threat in his mind was not an army outside his gates. It was the boy growing up under his roof. This boy was no ordinary child. He was the king's son and heir. Born into wealth, raised with tutors and servants, he carried the promise of the throne. Yet from the moment he began to walk and speak, whispers spread through the palace. Courtiers plotted, factions formed, and his father began to fear that one day the prince might rise against him too soon. The king had enemies. Many wanted to use the boy as a symbol, a puppet heir to overthrow the ruling power. In such a climate, blood was no shield. In fact, being too close to the throne was often a death sentence. History is filled with fathers who killed sons, mothers who killed daughters, and siblings who slaughtered one another in the desperate hunger for survival and rule. The boy prince became a victim of this merciless game. He was not accused of crime, nor had he raised a sword in rebellion. He was guilty only of being born with royal blood and a face too young to inspire loyalty. Yet to his father, that was threat enough. Rather than a public execution that might spark outrage, the king chose something more secretive, more sinister. He ordered that his son be locked away in the depths of the castle, cut off from the light, stripped of food and care, left to rot in silence. It was a punishment designed not for justice, but for erasure. If the boy disappeared slowly, forgotten by the world, then his father would remain safe, unchallenged, and unshaken. This was the world of medieval power, where the greatest danger was not an invading army, but the shadow cast by your own family. And for the boy prince, that shadow would swallow him whole. At first the young prince resisted. Locked behind thick doors, he cried for his father, for mercy, for freedom. But no answer came. His meals grew smaller, his guards grew harsher, and the once bright child began to wither. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. His skin grew thin, sores opened across his body, and his young frame shrank. The damp stone walls were his only companions, dripping with moisture, crawling with vermin. The prince's prison was not just physical, it was psychological. He had been condemned to die slowly, to feel his body betray him piece by piece. The hope that his father might come back to save him faded into despair. Soon, he stopped calling out, stopped fighting, and let the silence consume him. Witnesses later described how the boy's flesh began to rot while he still lived. His body, deprived of nourishment, decayed as he sat in the filth of his cell. His once noble features twisted into a mask of suffering. And all the while, his father, the king, remained untouched, ruling above while his heir decomposed below. Historians still argue over the details. Some say the prince's bones were found gnawed by rats. Others believe he died delirious, hallucinating in darkness, long before his body gave out. What is certain is that his death was not quick, not merciful. It was stretched across endless nights, an agony meant to erase him from history, and it nearly worked. For centuries, his story was whispered only in fragments, passed down in chronicles that dared not criticize the crown. Yet even in fragments, the horror survived. The tale of a boy rotting alive became a symbol of the cruelty of unchecked power. Imagine being a child, too young to understand politics, too innocent to grasp betrayal, and realizing that the man you trusted most had condemned you to suffer alone. That is what makes this story so haunting. It is not just about history or monarchy. It's about the breaking of one of the most sacred human bonds, between father and son, between protector and child. For the people of the time, whispers of the boy's fate spread like poison. Some wept in secret, horrified that their prince was suffering in silence. Others dared not speak at all, for fear that pity for the child would be seen as treason against the king. The emotional scar of such cruelty went beyond the prince himself. It infected the kingdom, casting a shadow of fear and distrust that lasted long after the boy's death. If a father could do this to his own son, what mercy could his subjects expect? The boy prince never raised a sword. He never conspired. He was guilty of nothing but being alive. And yet, he became the victim of one of history's most grotesque punishments. His story forces us to confront the darkest parts of human nature, the part where fear overpowers love, where ambition kills compassion, where power devours family. Centuries later, the boy prince remains a silent figure in history's shadows. His name is barely remembered, yet his fate lingers as a warning. Absolute power can twist even the most natural love into cruelty. A father's fear can become a child's death sentence, and the walls that once echoed with his cries still whisper of the horror he endured. This story reminds us that history is not only written in victories and crowns. It is also written in the suffering of the forgotten, the children, the powerless, the silenced. The boy prince who rotted alive in his father's prison is more than a tragic figure. He is a mirror held up to the dangers of unchecked authority. His story asks us to remember the cost of power when it is placed above humanity, and perhaps that is the greatest lesson we can take. No matter how high the throne, no matter how powerful the crown, when love is replaced by fear, when family is sacrificed to ambition, the result is always ruin. The boy's suffering should never have happened, but by remembering it, by speaking it aloud, we ensure his pain is not erased. So the next time you hear of kings and crowns, think also of the shadows they cast, the forgotten heirs, the silenced voices, the children who paid the price of their parents' greed. Thank you for watching this journey into one of the darkest corners of history. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories where truth is stranger and more horrifying than fiction. And so, the boy prince's life ended not on a battlefield, not in glory, but in silence and rot, condemned by the very man who should have loved him most. His story stands as a chilling reminder that unchecked power can poison even the bond between father and son. History may try to bury such tales, but remembering them keeps us from repeating them. If this dark story moved you, don't let it vanish into silence. Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more hidden truths of history that the world tried to forget.